Hey, my name is Elizabeth, a 47-year-old who once pursued a bustling career, which I set aside over 18 years ago for domestic life. Nowadays, my days are filled with routine chores and the simple pleasure of a morning coffee. On the surface, I'm just an ordinary middle-aged woman, but my passion for investing, which I've nurtured since before my marriage, has recently been rewarding me with significant returns. These profits have afforded me luxurious hotel brunches and spa days, adding a touch of elegance to my life. My husband, Gregory, 42, is a salesman for a prominent company. Over the years, he's put on weight and frankly hasn't been too attentive to personal hygiene, but his charm and eloquence never fail him. Despite his size, there's a lovable mascot-like quality to him that I adore. Although I've gently suggested he lose some weight for health reasons, I never press the issue too hard. We have a daughter, Helen, who is the epitome of grace and intelligence. She resembles Gregory, but surpasses both of us in beauty and brains. Excelling academically and athletically, she's reached national levels in sports competitions and is as humble as she is talented. In many ways, Gregory and I, like proud geese, marvel at how we could have raised such a swan. We dote on Helen, perhaps too protectively, but it's hard not to. Gregory has always had a soft spot for younger women, yet he chose to marry an older woman like me and has always valued our family. I've accepted his occasional wandering gaze as part of our life's compromises. We've lived in the same condo since Helen's birth, and although it's showing its age, it's been our family home filled with memories, now on the brink of turning into something new. Amidst a whirlwind of changes, Helen decided to move into an apartment near her college. At the same time, a relative informed us about inheriting a now vacant house. Gregory and I saw this as an opportunity and decided to renovate the property and make it our new home. Little did we know, this move would soon reveal cracks in our once smooth relationship. Our condo was a spacious 5-bedroom space, including a guest room, but the new house had just 2 bedrooms. Though smaller, we adapted it for our approaching retirement, transforming it into a comfortable single-story dwelling. One of the rooms, doubling as a study and guest room, could be partitioned to create an additional space for Helen whenever she might decide to return. As these changes took shape, Gregory began returning home late every night. His excuses ranged from work dinners to weekend outings. The scent of alcohol and cigarettes clung to him each night, making it unbearable to even be in the same room, even though we had separate beds. Consequently, I moved into the study permanently shortly after we relocated. When it came time to announce our move, I took it upon myself to manage the mailings. Gregory has never been one for handling such tasks, so I sent letters to his family and relatives on his behalf. Having lost my parents, I sent only a brief note to friends and relatives on my mother's side. I've had no contact with my father's family due to my history with my half-sister, Melissa. Melissa, 15 years my junior, was born to my father and his new wife shortly after my mother's death and my father's remarriage. Initially, I thought Melissa's arrival meant a blending of 2 families with children. However, about 6 years into their marriage, my father and his new wife tragically died in an accident. At their funeral, I learned they had been childhood friends, and many had expected them to marry long before he met my mother, who had introduced them through her boss. This revelation, combined with the complexities of our blended family history and the current strains in my marriage, painted a picture of a life marked by change and adaptation. As I settled into the new house and dealt with the emotional distance from Gregory, I found solace in the memories of simpler times and the hope that, perhaps, these changes would lead to new beginnings. Growing up, it was a bitter pill to swallow, learning that my dad had another child with his second wife, someone he couldn't turn away from, given their long-standing friendship from childhood. Melissa, my half-sister, seemed to have it all. She was always dressed in brand-name clothes, got the biggest room, and her favorite dishes were a staple at family gatherings. In contrast, I was burdened with household chores from cooking to laundry, and I juggled part-time jobs only to have my earnings taken from me. My living space was just a cramped storage room under the stairs, and I often had to plead for the simplest necessities. By the time Melissa reached elementary school, she knew about my mom from other relatives and started to look down on me. My life was a series of part-time jobs, saving every penny until I could afford to move out. Needless to say, harboring any positive feelings toward Melissa was beyond my capability, and I never shared news of my marriage or the birth of my child with her. A few weeks after I moved out, I was enjoying a peaceful afternoon tea when the doorbell rang. A muffled male voice announced a delivery on the intercom, but upon opening the door, I was stunned into silence. There stood Melissa, not a delivery person, but wearing the hat I had seen through the intercom camera. "Hi, sis. Long time no see. Just thought I'd drop by," Melissa said casually as she breezed past me into the living room and made herself comfortable on the couch. I followed swiftly, confronting her as she sat. I accused her of trickery. "That's just low, Melissa. You're scary," I exclaimed, my voice filled with tension. She feigned fear in an overly dramatic way, but the smirk on her face betrayed her true feelings. "I came for a visit," Melissa declared nonchalantly, despite the cold reception I gave her. She grinned, unfazed by my frostiness, and began to explain her unexpected visit. "But sis, you never even told me where you live. I got married, but my husband is always away on business trips." Despite her invasive and deceptive approach, here she was, trying to bridge years of distance and difference in a single, unexpected encounter. The tension in the room escalated as Melissa announced her intentions to stay, explaining how dull her life had become and that moving around would soon be a challenge due to her pregnancy. "Everyone told me to come and stay with you," she declared. "Just go home. I want nothing to do with you," I retorted, frustration boiling over. Yet Melissa was undeterred, irritating me further with her bold insistence on staying. In a low voice, tainted by anger and disbelief, I muttered, "Typical of a kleptomaniac's daughter." At my peak of frustration, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Get out! I never want to see your face again!" My voice was loud enough that people outside could likely hear the commotion. At that moment, Gregory walked in, his timing both unexpected and inconvenient. Melissa, seizing the opportunity, quickly sidled up to him, looping her arm through his. Gregory seemed unbothered, even pleased by her presence. "Oh, Melissa, welcome. My sister here was being mean. I thought it'd be nice to stay with you until the baby is born. Is that okay?" Melissa said, turning to Gregory with a look of hope. "Of course, I'd be thrilled. You can stay as long as you want," Gregory responded enthusiastically. I stood there, dumbfounded, watching the warm exchange between Gregory and Melissa, their closeness more reminiscent of lovers than siblings-in-law. "Gregory, what's going on?" I managed to ask, confusion and hurt lacing my voice. He brushed off my concerns, accusing me of being jealous of my cute little sister. His dismissive tone left me speechless, especially considering he knew all about my strained family background before we got married. "There's a spare bed in the guest room. You can stay there," Gregory said nonchalantly to Melissa. She quickly jumped at the chance, suggesting she'd rather sleep in the same room as him. Their flirtatious banter only deepened my growing headache. As they walked to the bedroom arm in arm, a sinking feeling took hold of me. Curiosity mixed with dread led me to peek into the room after a few minutes, where I saw them in an embrace that confirmed my worst fears. "The baby is thrilled too, living with Daddy?" Melissa exclaimed, revealing the shocking truth that Gregory was the father as they shared a kiss. Tears streamed down my face as I watched, hidden by the door's crack. From that day on, they treated me like nothing more than a servant. While I complied outwardly, I silently began gathering evidence, contemplating the painful but necessary steps toward a divorce. One day, Melissa, with an air of arrogance, demanded I vacate the room. "I need more space," she declared, her eyes flashing with spite that clashed with the usual serenity expected from a pregnant woman. I turned to Gregory, hoping for some support, but he sided with Melissa. Watching him take her hand joyfully was the last straw, extinguishing any residual feelings I had for him, though a trace of sadness lingered. "I'll leave tomorrow," I announced resolutely. To this, a seemingly elated Gregory suggested I should find somewhere else to stay that very night, claiming, "This is now my and Melissa's home." I simply nodded, suppressing my emotions, and left them to revel in their fleeting happiness. As I stepped outside, a smile crept across my face as I pondered the new chapter ahead. That night, I checked into a hotel and began making plans. The next day, I arranged for a moving company and visited City Hall, invigorated by the thrill of newfound freedom. Despite the sleepless night, my spirits remained high. Upon my return, I was surprised to find the movers confused by the empty-looking house. Inside, a small box awaited me, containing a mix of my cherished belongings tossed together carelessly. At the bottom of the box lay Gregory's wedding ring, adding insult to injury. The house was a mess, the traces of Gregory and Melissa's careless living evident everywhere. I instructed the movers to pack up their belongings as well. On the dining table, a note from Gregory and Melissa announced their 7-day trip abroad, asking for the house to be cleaned in their absence. They casually mentioned that the divorce would be finalized when they returned. Gregory's self-centered nature was astounding, but his absence simplified the execution of my plans. After the movers packed up my things, I left Gregory's wedding ring on the kitchen counter and departed from the house for the last time. After some consideration, I purchased a cozy one-bedroom apartment near Helen's University, which was conveniently on sale. The solitude it offered was a relief. On the day of Gregory and Melissa's return, my phone rang incessantly. Without needing to check, I knew it was them. I answered with a nonchalant, "Hello?" only to be met with Gregory's frantic voice. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. Remaining calm, I replied, "What do you mean, what's going on?" Gregory, clearly fuming, informed me that the house was empty. Bursting into laughter, I simply said, "Well, it was my house." When Gregory frantically asked me about the house, I calmly explained that since I no longer lived there was no reason for me to keep it. "We were living there, weren't we? Don't worry, everything's safely stored in a storage unit. I'll text you the location and access code," I assured him. Gregory, desperate, demanded that I return the house. I firmly reminded him that the house was under my name and had been funded entirely by my investments. His contribution had been non-existent, a fact he remembered only when convenient. He then pleaded with me to reconsider, citing that Melissa was in a difficult situation and emphasizing the baby's relation to him as his niece or nephew. I told him that I had been aware of his and Melissa's affair since the day she had stormed into our home. I had been gathering evidence, including recordings from a high-end baby monitor I had been persuaded to buy during one of Melissa's shopping sprees. The monitor, capable of recording even in pitch darkness, had captured everything. Upon revealing this, Gregory was speechless. With calculated calm, I mentioned that he should check the mailbox, where he found a certified letter addressed to him. I explained that it detailed the financial implications of their actions and that there was a similar letter for Melissa. Despite his pleas to discuss this with his lawyer, I ended the call. Following this, my old phone, used specifically for gathering evidence, was bombarded with calls which I ignored. After an hour, the calls ceased. The next morning, an attorney contacted me, sounding exhausted from the ongoing situation. Later, a relative from my father's side reached out on my new phone, likely having gotten the number from Melissa. Expecting reprimands, I recorded the call. The relative demanded an apology and a new house for Melissa, who was pregnant. Unmoved, I refused to apologize to the woman who had an affair with my husband. Instead, I asserted that Melissa owed me an apology and should be the one to pay compensation. When accused of being a vindictive person, I countered by reflecting on Melissa's actions as mirroring the betrayal embedded in her lineage. I instructed the relative to convey a message to Melissa, to never interfere in my life again, though I doubted she would heed the warning. Ending the call, I felt a wave of relief from the release of pent-up emotions. I immediately contacted my lawyer, determined to hold Melissa and Gregory accountable. The thirst for justice persisted until the moment I saw their dumbfounded expressions during a subsequent legal discussion, a sight that strangely soothed the tumult in my heart. At the lawyer's office, Melissa looked visibly upset, while Gregory's expression was one of annoyance, showing no signs of regret. As they sat there, seemingly more surprised than remorseful, I calmly placed the divorce papers in front of them, along with the marriage certificate. I offered them a deal, a reduction in the compensation demanded if they signed immediately. Without wasting a moment, Gregory grabbed the pen and signed the papers, followed by Melissa, who managed a smirk despite the situation. After they signed, I collected the documents, giving them a broad smile. "I'll submit these to the county office," I announced cheerfully. Melissa caught off guard and started to object, but I quickly informed her that the divorce had already been finalized during mediation the previous day. Her surprise was due to her ignoring multiple legal notices. As Melissa and Gregory absorbed this news, I revealed another shock: the possibility of Gregory disputing the paternity of the unborn child. Melissa's face dropped in shock and Gregory turned pale, realizing the serious implications this could have, including potential child support for another man's baby. Despite this, Gregory tried to plead for reconciliation, invoking our daughter Helen's well-being as a reason. Just then, the office door burst open and Helen walked in. Her sharp words stopped Gregory in his tracks, stunning him into silence, while Melissa, insulted and enraged, could only tremble. Helen declared her decision to cut ties with Gregory, calling Melissa derogatory names and expressing her intent to live with me instead. As Melissa struggled to respond to Helen's verbal barrage, I delivered the final piece of news. I outlined Gregory's financial shortcomings and asserted my ownership of our house and car, unraveling Melissa's plans to leverage the situation for financial gain. Her face turned ashen as the reality of her new circumstances set in. Leaving the office with my lawyer and Helen, we headed to dinner, enjoying each other's company for the first time in a long while. As for Melissa, after the required waiting period for remarriage, she and Gregory submitted their marriage license, ironically signed by Melissa's ex-husband, who had provided crucial information during the divorce proceedings. News soon spread that Gregory had been fired from his job for misusing company funds on secret trips with Melissa, leaving him scrambling with part-time work. Melissa, now responsible for a child and abandoned by her latest boyfriend, faced financial difficulties. Her attempts to disrupt my family had spectacularly backfired. Meanwhile, Helen thrived in college, and I relished a peaceful life financed by my stock dividends. Interestingly, I developed a friendship with Melissa's ex-husband, who now affectionately calls me Catherine. Recently, he reached out, hinting at an important conversation, leaving me slightly restless and flushed, reminiscent of a smitten young woman as I sat in front of my vanity mirror,